Australian literature really began in the more recent times, because as we've already examined, the Aboriginal people did not have a written history or a literature. As we've discussed, the way which they told their stories and their history was through passing down things by word of mouth. So a mother would tell the child, and then the child would tell their child. So as a result, there are no real history books or ancient Aboriginal pieces of literature. As a result, what this means is that while they had over 500 languages, and while they do have an extremely rich culture, this really wasn't the focus in Aboriginal society. What this means, therefore, is that literature began with the European settlement. So as we already know, Australian settlement began in 1788, and this was the beginning of the European, or really the modern Australian culture which we have today. So this is where literature began, and this is where we will begin looking at in the history of Australian literature. So, it's really important to understand the common themes which are really across a lot of different types of Australian literature. Although the Australian works which we're going to be looking at spread probably over 200 years, there are some common themes which you can see in all of these different works. And these are themes like this. What does it mean to be Australian? So asking about who Australians are, what sort of people they are, what they like, and really what it means to be an Australian and to belong to the Australian culture. The settler identity. So this difference between the Aboriginal culture and this new white culture, and the way in which perhaps they've clashed over time, and the way in which these have been resolved. They also focus on the idea of exile. A lot of Australian works focus on the theme of isolation and this fear of being alone on the big, lonely island of Australia. This was particularly relevant to all the European settlers who came out early on, and also the people who came out later during the gold rush. This idea of isolation from their own culture back at home, and this new really terrible fear of what this new rough bush country of Australia held for them. The migrant experience is also something which is really focused on in Australian work, and as we've said, this can spread across a vast history. Yes, the first migrants might have come out in 1788, but this idea continues today with even the boat people following the Vietnam War, and even the current situation involving the refugees. So this is something which Australian literature focused on not only in history, but also in the present. A relationship between the person and also place and nature is a very common theme in Australian literature. Not only is the idea that Aboriginal people have a definite belonging to place and their ancestral lands, but also the way in which the people who came to Australia developed this same connection through building new ties to their land is something which is explored through Australia's poetry and other literary works, which really explore the beauty of Australia's bush.